Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be having a little introduction to JavaScript. JavaScript, it's a very, very important language because you're always going to use JavaScript. Even though you're not using JavaScript as your basic programming language, like most of us that will be using Python as their basic programming language, you're going to need JavaScript because if you want to build out a front end application, the best scripting language for front-end application is JavaScript. If you're using high-end frameworks like React and Angular and Vue, all of them are built using JavaScript or some subsets of JavaScript like TypeScript. So JavaScript is so important, and that is why we must be learning JavaScript. We must learn it. Must learn it because we're going to be using React in our further projects. So why not learn JavaScript since React is built with JavaScript? And for us to understand how to use React, we need JavaScript. So the farm listing app that I'm building, I'm using React as the front end. So without the knowledge of JavaScript, I will not be able to use React or Angular. And that's why I want you guys to learn JavaScript. And to do this, I'm going to quickly share my screen so that we can do introduction today. Then furthermore, we can look at writing code itself. Now, one good thing about the JavaScript that we're going to be learning is that all the tools we've been using so far to write our Python, those are the tools we'll use for our JavaScript. Are we clear on that? Your VS Code that you've already installed, your Git, you understand, your GitHub that you have, your Chrome, all those things, we are using them for the JavaScript. And you guys remember that I told us to install Node.js. Did I tell us to install Node.js? Did I say that? And everybody have Node.js because Node is what you use in building out the backend for JavaScript. So with your Node.js, your VS Code, and all the things you have so far, we'll be able to code JavaScript. Are we clear on that? And that's why it's good we know how to do it. Because in the projects we'll be building, we are going to be using JavaScript. So if you get to our website, www.tclassified.com, you click on blog. Then when you scroll down, you're going to see JavaScript stack up. And that is where we're going to be picking what we'll be learning today and what we'll be developing on. So the short form of JavaScript is JS. Some people will say JS, React JS, Angular JS. You understand? Once you hear any framework and you have JS in the back, simply means that that framework was built from JavaScript. JavaScript is one of the most popular languages. That's just the truth. You understand? Because no matter what you want to do, you will need JavaScript. So JavaScript is a full-fledged dynamic programming language that can add interactivity to a website. So once you want your website to be interactive, you want your website to be dynamic, it has to have some elements of JavaScript. Is that clear? And that is why you must be learning it. JavaScript was invented by Brendan H. Who invented Python? Guido van Rossum invented Python, you understand? But JavaScript was invented by what? Brendan H. Who is the co-founder of Mozilla project? Every of you know Mozilla Firefox, isn't it? Who is writing on my screen? Please stop doing that. The Mozilla Foundation and the Mozilla Corporation. So Brendan H is from there. JavaScript is versatile and beginner friendly. You understand? When Ibrahim started his lecture, I was teaching him Java. Ibrahim, was it JavaScript you are learning? But you people came with switch to Python. You understand? Because two of them are the most beginner-friendly languages. So it's either you're teaching somebody Python or teaching the person JavaScript. Any of them is good for beginners. Is that clear? But JavaScript is so important because even if you are developing in Python, you will need a front-end framework done in JavaScript to make your front-end look good. You understand? Except if you choose to use Django for your front-end. But there's what we call React, which is the most popular of all the front-end frameworks that you can use or library. You can use to quickly create a front end that will be very nice and cute. Are we together on that? So JavaScript is versatile. Versatile simply means that you can use JavaScript to create anything, whether it's web application, mobile phone, you understand? Desktop application, use what we call Electron. It's a framework for JavaScript you can use to build that. Okay. So let's continue. With more experience, you'll be able to create games, animated 2D program, 3D games, comprehensive database-driven app, and much more. So with that, with JavaScript, you can do a whole lot. You can create games. Like I told you, you can use the framework known as Electron to build out desktop app, just like you can use Kiwi for Python. They also have what we call Ionic that you can use in building phone application using JavaScript. Okay, JavaScript itself is relatively compact, yet very flexible. Developers have written a variety of tools on top of core JavaScript, unlocking a vast amount of functionality with minimum effort, which includes browser application, programming interface, called APIs. There are lots of APIs that are done using JavaScript that are very, very useful. And you're going to be learning how to build out your own API using a very frequent method of building API known as REST API. And you're also going to know how to consume APIs that are already done by other people. Most people have done API already. So you learn how to use such API. Built into web browsers, providing functionality just as dynamically creating HTML and setting CSS styles, collecting and manipulating a video stream from a user webcam, and generating 3D graphics and audio samples. Third-party APIs that allow developers to incorporate functionalities into their sites from other content providers, such as Twitter and Facebook. When you go to my website, if you go on that online school, you're going to see YouTube videos that are already uploaded on my YouTube, but they are showing on my website. You know why? Because I'm using YouTube API on my website. You understand? So you can use API to tap from another person's content. You understand? Those contents are published. They are my content, but I publish them on YouTube. You understand? But I'm using them on Tclassified.com or Ekene University because I'm able to use their API. So you learn how to use API to connect the content that you have already in somewhere on your own website. So third-party frameworks and libraries that you can apply to HTML to accelerate the work of building sites and applications. Example of third-party framework and libraries you can use are Angular and React. So we'll be learning how to use this. So it's okay. So learning basically JavaScript, just like we learned in Python. When we started Python, what did we start with? What did we start with after the introduction? Variables, isn't it? I would say that we have different data types and variables. We noted them. So that was where we started. So to give you a better understanding of how JavaScript works, let's explain some of the core features of the language. It's worth noting that these features are common to all programming languages. They are common. Because we've done it already in Python, it's the same thing that it is here. You omit your normal variables, if-else statements that we've looked at, isn't it? Your loops. You understand? Conditional statements, all those things we did in Python, we're going to see them here. Okay. So I have variables, are containers that store value. Is that what we did in under Python? They are containers that do what? Store value. And to declare variables, you use the keyword var and let, which we are going to be looking at. So let's say an example of a variable name is my variable. To prefix it, to show that it's a variable, you must say let in front. Is that clear? So this is a variable name, just like you can say, let my name be equal to Abdurrahman. There has to be let, then the variable name, then equal to, then the value. Okay, a semicolon at the end of the line indicates where the statement ends. In Python, do you use semicolon? You don't. You use what we call indentation. You just give space. But in JavaScript, you're going to find out that you're going to be using a whole lot of semicolons. Now, JavaScript is case sensitive. That means that this my variable does not mean the same thing as this my variable. This one has a capital letter V. It shouldn't mean the same as this. Small letter name and big letter name, they don't mean the same thing because it is what? Case sensitive. Now, you can either use let or var to declare a variable. You can also use what we call const. So const is when the value of the variable is not changing. Let is when it's changing. Let and var, they do the same thing when the value is changing, but their scope are different. Var is for global scope, whereas let is for a specific code block. Okay, so this is an example. Let my variable be equal to 4. It's an example of using let. Who can give me an example where you can use const instead of let? Who knows the value of pi? Pi in mathematics, what's the value of pi? 3.142. That's always the value, isn't it? So since you know that the value of pi is never changing, if you want to declare pi in your code, you have to use const. You understand? So you say const pi equal to 3.144 because you know the value is never going to change. Now we learned about data types. What are the data types we had in Python when we were learning? We say we have string, word float, boolean, tuple, dictionary, what? Tuple set, isn't it? But in JavaScript, we also have the variable data types, and the ones we have are string, number, boolean, array, and object. Is that clear? So with that, we are going to end for today, and I'm going to give you an assignment. List out the data type that we have in Python and compare them to the ones we have in JavaScript. When I mean compare, I mean you're going to get me the similarities, you understand, and difference. You're going to find out that array is the same thing as list. Array in JavaScript simply means the same thing as list in Python, you understand? So I expect you to tell me all those differences and their similarities with examples. You can see the way they gave examples here. Number is 10, but my variable is Bob. Because Bob is a string, that's why it's enclosed in a single quote. But the number 10 is just left there because it's a number. Boolean, like we know, the value is true or false. But you can see that the Boolean here is small letter true, isn't it? For Python, the T is supposed to be capital letter. So these are the things I want you to identify for me in differentiating and in comparing the data types in JavaScript vis-a-vis those in Python. Yeah, so with that, we're going to end. So the next class we are going to be having in JavaScript, we're going to be writing codes in VS Code. So please get this introduction. Thank you and God bless you. Remember, everything you want is in Christ Jesus.